Hey Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols, and I'm here to bring you your Nichols Worth. And today from Tiny Bibles, in cooperation with Tindale 1534, we have the 1534 New Testament from William Tyndale. Now this is an important translation in the history of English Bibles. We're going to do a quick walk through that history, and then we're going to dive into this. But also, Martin Chamberlain of Tiny Bibles does these little tiny Bibles. I've done a review on both of these, the Gospel of John and the full Bible in the New King James. I'll put those on the end screen, but we're going to talk about the history of this really quick. In order to do this, the first thing we need to do is go to the hexapla. And this is 6 different English translations, pretty much in order of when they were translated. First, we have the 1380 Wycliffe New Testament. This was translated from the Latin. So this wasn't translated from the original languages. This is more of a translation of a translation. But in 1526, William Tyndale, for the first time, translated an English Bible from the original Greek text in the New Testament. He also did some work on the Old Testament, which we'll get to in a bit. After that was the Cranmer Bible. The Cranmer Bible, also known as the Great Bible, was commissioned by Henry VIII in response to his separation from the Catholic Church, and he wanted an authorized English translation for the Church of England. Up to this point, the Wycliffe and the Tyndale were not authorized. In fact, ultimately William Tyndale was killed in 1536, executed. Some believe that it was simply because he translated the Bible into English. That's a little oversimplistic. It's also because of his complex relationship with Henry VIII. Hence, when he died, he said, "Lord, open the eyes of the king." And also with this complicated relationship with the Roman Catholic Church, they considered him a heretic. So it was those 3 things that kind of worked together that ended up in his execution, and some would say martyrdom. The Cranmer Bible, also known as the Great Bible, commissioned by King Henry VIII, which we just discussed a moment ago, and then we move into the Geneva Bible, which is the first official Bible of the Protestant Reformation. Moving into the Douay Rheims, which was sort of a response to the Geneva Bible, became an official translation of the Catholic Church, then moving into the 1611 authorized version, which we know as the most popular translation in English-speaking history. But there was one that has been skipped in this. I've also done a review of this. I'll put that on the end screen as well. And that is the 1537 Matthew's Bible. Now what this is the Tyndale New Testament plus portions of William Tyndale's work in the Old Testament, because he was martyred, or shall we say executed, before he was able to complete the Old Testament. So they pulled in some Swiss translations, some of Martin Luther's German translation, some of the Vulgate, along with William Tyndale's work, and created this first completed English Bible using William Tyndale's New Testament and, of course, a hodgepodge of the Old Testament. And you can see beautiful facsimile of the original Matthew's Bible, which was put together by John Rogers under the pseudonym Thomas Matthew, because he ended up not wanting to be persecuted as a result. So he kind of wrote this under a pseudonym, but then ultimately he was. Now let's move into the 1526. Now this is owned by the British Library, but they allowed Hendrickson Publishers to do a facsimile of this, and it's exactly what it is. Even, look, it's got the little cool like handwriting there. So this is an exact copy. Now this has the full New Testament, and you can see this has not been retypeset. This is an exact copy, so it's not going to fit exact to the pages. It has the original drop caps, original colors. Really beautiful pocket-sized Bible. This was easy to smuggle. That was one of the reasons to keep it at that size. But it just has the New Testament. It doesn't have any of the prologues, which we're going to get to in a moment. When you get to the end of this one, it does have an abbreviated to the readers. So why the 1534, and why did Martin Chamberlain and Felix O'Neill, who actually owns this original copy of the 1534 and was really the brainchild behind this coming into print? This guy is fascinating. He's got a couple of videos. I want to put those in the description just so he can talk about this thing. It's amazing. But first of all, it does come with a dust jacket. This one did too. I don't like dust jackets, so I'm going to go ahead and take this off. It does have a little bit of information about William Tyndale, but this has a brown, it seems like a clothy overboard cover. It has a single ribbon that it's not really satin. I'm not sure what that is. You got a paper liner. I can't tell if it's reinforced, but it looks like it may be. But again, this is going to be exactly like that. Nothing is going to be corrected. This is 100% original. Now, what makes this really cool is it has some extras. First of all, William Tyndale updated this in 1534, and he was unalived 2 years later by the Roman Catholic Church. But this one is not as ornate, but it does have some really important additions to it. Number one, it does have some nice drop caps. It does have the full New Testament. It has a more extended to the reader. Then you move into your New Testament. It's going to have your Gospel of Matthew, but what makes this one different is a couple of things. Number one is it has what is called prologues. And these prologues to the different epistles, there's several of them all throughout this Bible, but they really show how they tie into Jesus. And I have not read the prologues. I am trusting Felix on this because he's the one that puts this together, because I cannot read this. This is in more of an early modern English, slightly before the King James. The Wycliffe Bible is in Old English. It's virtually unreadable today because it's almost like a different language. Adding the prologues back, and also this one has the textual notes alongside the translation. This one does a little bit here and there, but not as extensive as this one. So you're going to have William Tyndale's footnotes, translator notes as some would call them, and you're going to have his prologues, which he wrote as he updated this Bible. So once we get past the book of Revelation, it has something called the epistles to the Old Testament. I was very confused by that, but apparently what this is, they had a liturgy where you could read through the Old Testament according to a calendar. So they'd have excerpts from Isaiah and different places in the Old Testament. Really cool. So you didn't have the Old Testament in print, although William Tyndale was still working on it, but he was ultimately unalived a couple years after this, so he wasn't able to complete it. But you still get a little bit of Old Testament in this. And then when you get here, this is called the table. And this is somewhat sort of like a concordance. It gives you some different topical or word references. So really cool. This is something very important. The English Bible and its translation from 1380 all the way up to 1611 was a very volatile and often a very dangerous process, because if the Catholic Church viewed you as a heretic, then your translation often went along with that, because they felt your translation or the textual notes were also jaded against the Catholic Church. Now, the Protestant Church isn't innocent in this time either. There's all kinds of ugly and bloody history that surround the church during this era. So I don't advocate vilifying either side, but I do think that history needs to be told. And William Tyndale is probably the greatest influence on English Bibles that we have today. It said that well over half of the King James is either directly inspired or even directly translated over from the Tyndale. We also have John Rogers to thank for this work with the Matthew's Bible. There is just so much that went into preserving our Bibles, and so much blood was shed. Please read your Bibles. God bless you. Keep calm. Jesus on. This is your Nicholsworth.